I'm not sure the SNP will get regular questions, actually, at PMQs anymore, but all of this will settle down as the familiarity returns. And Lindsay Hoyle called Rishi Sunak Prime Minister, I think, at one point, so it's not just us that are
mistake to make.
struggling to adjust to the new order.
I think we give them a couple of chances to redeem themselves with interesting, informative questions. If they don't, that's it. Sorry, SNP, you're gone.
Fair enough. Two lines, really. For the winter fuel payments for pensioners, where Starmer is quite vulnerable, and then the arms licences for Israel, 30 out of 350 being suspended, where the lawyer kicked in and Sunak was less successful.
Yeah, I think we're going to be hearing four main arguments, I think, from Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives' opposition strategy in the next sort of 3 to 4 weeks anyway, until the leadership contest is over. Unions and pay deals, which is exactly what Rishi Sunak went on. Accusations of cronyism, which he didn't. I imagine that will crop up at some point in the next few weeks for Prime Minister's questions.
It might be tricky for him to throw that. I noticed that the woman who is going to potentially investigate allegations of cronyism by Keir Starmer was a former chair of Vote Leave, appointed to that role by a former chair of Vote Leave.
Well, that might be so. He is probably still going to go on it, I reckon.
We'll see.
3, winter fuel, which obviously, of course, that's going to be, I think, Keir Starmer's biggest weakness in the run-up to the budget, and the Conservatives have sensed a little bit of weakness there and are going to poke that bruise as much as possible. And then 4th, Israel, which touched on as well. Like you say, I think Keir Starmer obviously had a response to that, completely ready to go, put on his lawyer hat and was absolutely ready for that question and had a very detailed answer to give. But I think rightly this has divided politicians on both sides of the House. Many Conservative politicians are worried about what the implications will be for Israel. I think, to be fair to the Rishi Sunak, he was quite notedly muted in his
it's also reported today, of course,
that
that David Cameron would have received very similar legal advice and ignored it or sat on it, and so elected not to conduct UK government according to the rules of international law. And something Starmer didn't point out, as I understand it, if Israel were to prove its commitment to getting aid freely into Gaza and its commitment to treating detainees in conjunction with international law, these licences could be reissued tomorrow.
Yes, David Lammy did allude to that in the Commons earlier this week when he made that statement that he hoped that normal diplomatic service could at some point resume, that potentially he could change his mind on issuing these licences again. But equally, he is already facing increasing pressure, especially from Labour backbenchers, to go even further and to revoke even more of these licences, saying absolutely this is not enough. It's not going to have a material impact on Israel going forward in terms of the war effort.
At which point it becomes policy rather than law. I can't see that happening.
I don't think so.
As I mentioned earlier, when Starmer is discussing the law, he's an almost different politician from when he is discussing everything else. He's got supreme confidence on the law. A lot of people think of that moment when Boris Johnson was claiming that there hadn't been any parties or he hadn't lied about it, and Starmer just went, we'll just leave that there. And it's a different mode almost for video game fans.
Yeah, I think so. And I think you heard that slight switch in tone from Keir Starmer when he started talking about that. And he's talking about how it's not policy, it's a legal decision. It is something that the government of the day don't have a lot of control over exactly what that policy looks like. But it is a legal decision. It is a black or white. It is that there is a clear risk they could be being used in Gaza in some form of breach of international law. And that is not a risk that governments can take. And of course, he can also use the argument, this is a government that stands by the law, which is something that the Conservatives arguably couldn't do in the last, and especially the years of Boris Johnson, at least.
And then Ed Davey coming in with what you might describe as trademark interest and concern for unpaid carers, with a powerful question, knitting it to the winter fuel payment. I presume Ed Davey's not going to inherit Stephen Flynn's mantle of going after the Labour Party quite as enthusiastically as he went after the Tory party.
Potentially, yes, but equally, the Liberal Democrats did successfully quite well in getting onto some of Labour's turf in the last election. Obviously, they did incredibly well, and Keir Starmer needs to be not just looking to the risk from parties like Reform, but to the risk from parties like the Liberal Democrats. They are far more of the opposition than the SNP are now at all. So yes, going on caring and winter fuel, I think that was a good one for him to start off with. And like I say, I do think it's a weakness for Keir Starmer, this winter fuel issue.
It's not going away.
Don't think it's going to go away. I think people will be asking questions about this day in, day out of government until the budget.